Hey guys, Kara with Grains in Small Places here, and today I'm going to show you a pound cake, and I'm going to make it with all fresh milled flour. So let's get to it. Okay, so to start out, I'm going to use Kamut and soft white wheat for this. I like the flavor of the Kamut, so I'm going to add that into it. I'm going to add about 60 grams of this, which is about a quarter cup of the wheat berries. And then I'm going to use my soft white wheat, and I'm going to mill about a cup of those. And that just is the best pastry type flour for cakes and cookies and things like that. So I'm going to mill about 180 grams of this, and this total should yield me about 2 cups of flour. I'm just going to mill it in my Nutrimill Harvest Grain Mill, which I really love this mill, but as you can see, you do have to adjust the top right here. I tighten it after I put the wheat berries in, and that way I get a nice fine flour. I find that that's a step people skip sometimes. So I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees. These are all the ingredients that I had to leave out to become room temperature. And here is my beautiful fresh milled flour ready to go to make this pound cake. I'm going to grab my mixer, and we're just going to start putting our ingredients in and assembling this. I'm going to grab my bowl and my cookie paddle, basically. I guess this is what this attachment is called for my mixer. And to start with, we want to cream our butter and sugar, so we want to make sure that we do start with a softened butter. I like to pull it out overnight, the night before. That way it's nice and soft. If you don't get to it, that's fine. I do put a little trick here. You could put it in your proofer, or there's many ways that you can soften it. But you don't want it to be melted, just softened. Room temperature is perfect. I'm going to start to just beat the butter around to get it nice and soft before I add in my sugar. And this is about 1 pound of butter, or 2 sticks. And to that, I'm going to add 1 cup of sugar. I just have raw cane sugar here. You can use whatever sweetener you would like to use. And I want to make sure that I mix those together really well. I'm going to turn it on my highest speed, which is 4 on this mixer. And I'm going to just make sure that the butter and the sugar get creamed completely to where the butter looks lighter in color and fluffier, and I just know that that's ready to go. I don't really want to skip this step because it will affect the texture of our pound cake in the end. And you can see that the butter has already started to lighten in color. And while you're in this stage creaming the butter and sugar, you do want to make sure that you scrape the sides down every so often, because a lot of times that butter will want to stick to the edges and then it does not incorporate all the way. So just want to make sure that at least 1 to 2 times while we're creaming the butter and sugar to scrape those sides down. And all in all, creaming the butter and sugar probably will take 3 to 5 minutes depending on your butter and humidity and the temperature. I'll make sure to put a link to this recipe down in the description box below in case you're interested in it. And it has a link to go ahead and print it off as well. That way, if you like it, you can add it to your collection. Okay, it's starting to look great now, and you'll notice that the color is much lighter than what it was when I started. And it's very fluffy. I don't know if they consider it stiff peaks for butter, but you can see that it is basically a stiff peak type texture. I'm just scraping the sides down to make sure that everything is incorporated and I have it all together. You can see how fluffy this is. And this is literally just softened butter and sugar. And air, I suppose. And now we're going to go ahead and add those 4 eggs. We're going to add them. We wanted to make sure they were room temperature so they don't affect the temperature of the creamed butter and sugar. But in between each egg, we're going to go ahead and mix that in until the egg is completely mixed throughout. And I'm going to do this with all 4 eggs. And I'm probably going to want to scrape down my sides as well, just to make sure that all the eggs did get incorporated even against the edges of my bowl. And then after all 4 eggs have been added, I'm going to go ahead and just whip this around for probably about 2 more minutes or so, just to make sure everything is really well combined. And you can see the texture of this is really getting very lovely. And while that's mixing together, I'm going to go ahead and add my dry ingredients to my flour. And I'm going to go ahead and add in 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to mix that into the flour. That way it's all just kind of incorporated into there before I add that to my wet ingredients. I probably should be careful balancing this up here. Okay, and then we're just going to set the flour to the side. And I want to grab the milk that I had sitting out at room temperature. This is 1/2 cup of milk. And I'm going to add about a teaspoon of vinegar to the milk. And I guess that kind of will turn it into a buttermilk type thing. But we want it to be a little bit acidic. So I suppose you could use buttermilk here instead, but I don't really like to keep buttermilk on hand. I don't go through it enough, so I really like to just make my own homemade. Again, I'm going to go ahead and just try to balance the milk on my mixer here. Probably not a good idea. It's not very stable. And here it goes. Oh no! Okay, so let me get that cleaned up and we'll go ahead and try this again. Oh no! So I'm going to move the mixer and I'm going to get my 1/2 cup of milk. Now this milk isn't going to be room temperature anymore because I've already let that other milk sit out. But I'm going to use our Fairlife milk just because we have some dairy issues in our family and this really seems to help us. Some of us. And I'm going to add in that teaspoon of vinegar and give it a little stir. I probably should have done this on the counter in the first place. That way I didn't have a big mess to clean up. And I'm lucky that the same thing did not happen when I had my flour bowl up here. So this is my homemade vanilla. I can put a link below if you're interested in learning how to make your own vanilla. But I'm going to use about a teaspoon of this vanilla extract. I love having it on hand, nice in bulk, never having to worry about running out. In fact, I have a backup that we made together back in the fall that should be ready by the time this one is empty. So I'm going to stir the liquid ingredients up before I add it into my mixture. And then comes the fun part. So for texture wise, we want to make sure that we alternate adding in this wet ingredient of the milk and the dry ingredients with the flour. So we want to start with the flour and put a little bit of flour in and mix it around slowly. And then we'll add a little bit of the milk mixture and we'll mix that around slowly. So in between each one, we want to make sure that we give it a good mix until it looks incorporated. And we're going to continue to alternate back and forth, but we want to make sure that we always start and end with the flour. So you can see me kind of just putting a little bit, just guesstimating each time and saving a little bit of the flour so I can add that in at the end. I'm not sure why this works, but it does work. It helps to make our cake less dense, I think. I've tried the dump and go method before and it hasn't been as successful, so I'm not really sure of the science on this one, but this is just what seems to work. So I'm sharing the method with you. While that last little bit is mixing in, I'm going to go ahead and get some parchment paper on my baking pan. I'm just going to use one of my 4x8 bread tins. A 9x5 bread tin would probably work fine too. Just going to put some parchment paper in it and then spray that with some oil. That way it doesn't stick and it comes out nice and fluffy. And I like the parchment paper also because it gives me little handles to pull it out and I don't have to worry about it ripping or sticking to my pan. Okay, and this texture is looking quite nice. So I think we're going to go with that. And I'm just going to take that and pour it into the prepared pan. And this is going to bake. I baked this for about an hour to an hour and 5 minutes. However, I will say after eating it, it did need a little less time in the oven. So I would say start checking it at about 55 minutes. everybody's oven's going to be a little bit different. So I would say 55 to 60 minutes would be about ideal. I want to get all this yummy goodness into the baking pan. So if you don't like it as dark as mine was on top, you could always, at the end of the baking, maybe the last 10 or 15 minutes of baking, you could probably put a little tint of foil on top, and then you wouldn't get it as brown. But I kind of like it with the brown. I like the contrast of color when you slice into it with that dark brown exterior and the nice golden yellow interior. I want to make sure to get every last bit. And then I'm just going to smooth the top around, make sure there's no peaks that will end up burning or anything like that, just as smooth as we can get it. And they say pound cake flavor kind of matures over time, so you could wait till the next day to eat this, but my family couldn't wait, so we ate it the same day. If you're interested in learning how to mill your own flour at home, I have some information on a fresh milled flour 101 video. I'll link that below for you as well. Then we're going to go ahead and pop that in the oven and let it bake. While we were traveling through the West Virginia mountains, we heard a kablam and had an issue with our truck. As you can see, the part exploded and there was nowhere to be seen to fix it, so Matt had to kind of jerry-rig it on the side of the road until we could get another 30 miles to get to an auto parts store who also didn't have the part. So here's his little makeshift with the new parts. And then the next day, kablam, we heard it again, and he had to fix it once more until we could get to a destination where we could have the proper parts shipped. And now we're entering back into Ohio to see family. And here are the results. Yum, it smells delicious. I love that little characteristic crack at the top that pound cake always has. And then I'm going to let it sit in the pan actually for about 5 to 10 minutes and then pull it out on the cooling rack and just pull my parchment paper off around the top. And then we're going to let you take a look as we slice it so you can see the inside texture. Just turned out perfect. You could serve this with a little bit of powdered sugar on the top, or just plain how it is, or however you traditionally like to have pound cake. We are going to serve it with some fresh sliced strawberries and some whipped cream, and this was delicious. And we actually ended up pouring a little bit of milk over the top, which sounds strange, but that's something that Matt is used to doing from when he was a child, so it brings back a lot of great memories for him from his childhood. So I thought that was really special that we were able to recreate that memory by accident. Just a perfect little dessert. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today while we made this delicious looking pound cake. I can't wait to give it a try. And don't forget to give me a like and subscribe and comment and share with your friends. And you can find this recipe and a whole lot of other recipes on my blog at grainsandsmallplaces.net. So until next time, thanks for stopping by Grains and Small Places. Goodbye.